I'd like to welcome you all here to the City of Milton Fire Department. I appreciate everybody coming. I'm impressed with the crowd size. A lot of times organizations, Saturday morning, it's hard to get folks out, so this is good. I'm Johnny Rebel. I'm Chief of City of Milton Fire Department. This is Jim Custard. He's captain on B shift. He's company officer in charge today at the station. We're going to be walking you through on-scene responder rehab for emergency scenes. And we're going to talk about the specifics of that and all, and how y'all can help us during certain emergency scenes. Before we get started with all of that, just a little bit of housekeeping. You came in the front door of the classroom. This is the back door. Use the left door if you've got to go out. Bathrooms are right down the hall in there. This is a working fire station. So if we're out in the bays doing practical exercise or anything, if you hear the radio open up and the beep, beep, beep and all of that stuff, we probably have an actual alarm and we're on our way out the door. So just kind of get out of the way and don't get in front of fire trucks and all guys are going to be scrambling. He would have to take off if we get a fire call. We're here, we're on duty. We get a fire call. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you later because it's all hands on that. But other than that, we'll go ahead and move forward. He and I are going to tag team on this. So responder rehab. Why do we do this?
Good morning. I wasn't nervous until I thought I was being recorded, so I'm involved on that. So the first slide, we're talking about why it's important. Firefighting is hard work. When the kids come, we always show them the gear we wear, the extra weight. We describe it as a big heavy winter outfit, big heavy winter coat, and then we put it on the hottest days of the year. So then we go to a place where it's a heat index of 100 right now or whatever, and then we go to a place where it's 200 degrees hotter than that. So that really wears the body down. So we have procedures in place to set up rehab to keep us in top shape, so that we can continue to perform at that fire and then any subsequent fire that we catch during the shift. So it prevents the fatigue-related injuries. Firefighters have a high risk, especially on the high days of cardiac issues, strokes, that sort of thing. And it can be caused by the heat, the fatigue from the heat. So proper rehab procedures will help reduce those risks for us. It allows us to relieve excessive heat and cold. We don't deal with the cold a whole lot here, but heat is definitely an issue. We've already, as part of our EMT refresher program that we do, we are working to go through preventative measures that we can take for ourselves and go through the rehab procedure as well. And we emphasize the importance of it so that guys don't try to skip out of it or anything like that. Provides a chance to rehydrate in an unhurried environment. Fire scenes are very hectic. Really, any emergency scene is very hectic. So in order to properly rehab, we remove them from the scene and give them a chance to sit down, take all their protective equipment off, and drink water, electrolyte, Gatorade-type drinks, so that they can properly hydrate, because that will also help prevent the heat emergencies and the heart attacks and stuff. And then it affords the opportunity to assess a physical condition of responders. I don't believe this is the part that you guys are going to do, but we have agreements with Lifeguard Ambulance, which is our EMS service here in San Jose County. And anytime there's a fire or we request them for rehab, they'll send an ambulance and they'll do medical assessments. So we get checked into rehab, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And we will, they'll do an assessment. They'll check blood pressure, vitals, that sort of thing. And we have parameters that are laid out. And if we don't meet the parameters, they stay in rehab or they send us for further assessment. So it just kind of gives us a chance to do that. And we, hopefully get everybody where they are recovered enough to continue working.
Yeah, one of our maxims in the fire service is everybody goes home. You came in at 7 o'clock in the morning, start your shift. In our case, we work 24/48, 7 o'clock the next morning. Our goal is we want everybody to be ready to go home. So an emergency scene, we're doing dangerous work. We get that. We accept that when we sign up for this. But we try to reduce the potential for negative impact on the responders as much as possible. So that's why this whole thing is so critical. No, this thing gets touchy. Okay. So basic essential supplies that we're going to be talking about. And I'm working with Tim Trowbridge and with ARC, and we're talking about, the resource capability that you as an organization will have and resources on scene. Some of the basic fundamentals that are critical. And it's hard for us. Keep in mind, when we go to a fire emergency or something like that, what we are sending are fire trucks. We're sending engine companies, ladder companies, rescues and all. But these are vehicles that are set up primarily to do their job and everything about that vehicle. And when we get done in here, we can show you our trucks if y'all would like to look at them. We've got a brand new one we like to show off. But we can show you those and how we configure those. They're set up to do their primary job. So carrying stuff like coolers of ice and water, although we do have a nice cooler on there, it only has a limited supply of bottled water. There's extreme limitations to what we're able to do toward this end. So that's where when we get a long protracted incident, you guys could help us if you have resources or can gather these resources and get them to us or get them to the scene so we can get that set up. So the supplies we need: coolers of ice and water, electrolyte drinks, Gatorade, I don't know so much Pedialyte, but Powerade, yeah. Those kinds of drinks. Clean hand towels. These are outstanding because what you do is you take these clean hand towels and you put them down in the ice water. And then you hand those to the responder, and then they can put it up there in the back of their neck or wipe their face with it or whatever. Now, we're not going to keep recycling these. We can wash them and then have them ready for use next time. But we don't want to, keep dumping them and passing them on. But those are a godsend on a hot day. And it's just something as simple as that. So a huge stack of those in a cooler that we can just dump them in that we're not drinking out of. You can have drinks in it and use that water, but we don't want drinking water. We don't want to be doing that, but those are great. Folding shelters just to get out of the sun. Something like this, it doesn't have to say rehab. It doesn't, the $100 easy up shelter, those are great. But just something we can set up where we can get out of the sun. You notice this has got a line of them, so 2 or 3 of them lined up. So you've got a large shadow area that you can get under with plenty of ventilation around it. Folding chairs. This is an extra fancy one. I have talked to Tim. I sent him an email with the specs and the ordering information. These are over $100 a piece. They don't look that impressive, but they're especially designed for rehab. You'll notice that this is see-through here. This allows airflow through the chair. You've got a mesh pouch in here, and we have little bags that go down in there. We can pour this lukewarm water in there, and then when the firefighter sits down, he's slung low. He can rest his arms down in there in that water, and that lets the core temperature that's coming through the blood go out into the water much more quickly. We don't want to use ice water. We don't want to shock the system, but you go in that room temperature water, and it allows that heat to be exhausted very quickly. So these are great, and so I did pass on to him, and so if y'all want to encourage him, find some money, buy some. So a cache of these, a dozen or so to 20 or so would be plenty, I would think. Have those on hand and be able to set those up real easy. Other than that, a basic folding chair will work. Something that it's not big, bulky, it's not going to insulate, and you can get comfortable in it. Fans or heaters in winter. You see in this case a fan set up right there. If you use a fan, keep in mind on the emergency scene, typically if there's power to that facility, we've shut it off. We may have had Gulf FP&L kill the power to the immediate area, so there may not be electricity. So if we talk about fans, they're either battery operated or we need generators. Now we're shifting to a lot of battery operated fans. We've used fans for years. We used to use smoke ejectors to suck the smoke out. Then within the past 25 years or so, we switched to positive pressure ventilation where we blow clean air in to push the smoke out the other side. But those were gasoline engine fans. So they introduced carbon monoxide and exhaust gases and all that. No bueno. In this case, now our new fans are battery operated. They're quieter. They move some serious air. They're great. But they're really designed to move huge volumes of air. They will work at a slower pace, but these are very, very expensive fans. So we may need to look at something, little Honda generator set off to the side and a fan or something like that. But if we can get air moving to keep people cooled down, that's going to be the key. Because on a day like today and later this week is going to be, with heat indexes well over 100, if you don't have air moving, it's hot no matter what you do. It's just hot. And then notepads, pens, basic things like that. Because part of what y'all are going to be doing, like Jim mentioned, is you're going to log them in and log them out. We want to keep track of what we're doing. That record keeping is critical. As Jim had said, the physiological impact of firefighting is tremendous. And the capacity to cool down and do all of that is critical so that we don't have medical issues with these firefighters. But all of the best things being done, nonetheless, we still have medical issues of firefighters hours or even a few days after they've exhausted themselves on a fire scene. And then that's a line of duty workers' compensation injury. And you get all these investigators and all this going on. Record keeping is crucial. That's where we're going to go back to that log and keep up with that, because we're going to need that information to show, okay, we did the right thing. We had rehab set up. We logged them in. We logged them out. And quite honestly, that's an area where we've got a lot of problems, because with the limited staffing we have on a typical fire, we don't really have that going on like we should. We certainly would want, if you guys come out and set up a very formal rehab setup, we would want to make sure that's happening as well. So just that kind of basic stuff. That's really about all we're looking at to be able to set up a rehab and run a very effective rehab. Food and things like that on a long-term incident, yeah, not a bad idea. Only thing I would really look at with that, on one recent incident, we had donuts. The bakery had just opened back up because it had been closed for a while because of storm damage, and they just opened up, and it was like, run down there and get donuts. I thought, okay. In my mind, that's not great food for a rehab area. Energy bars, something like that, just so you can build a little protein and some carbs and just, get some energy back up. But short of that, if we go more than a 12-hour work period, then, yeah, unquestionably, we're going to need to work with logistics at EM and get Salvation Army or somebody out there. We've been real successful, and I know Tim's trying to set up relationships with some of the businesses to where we can go in and they'll make donations. And we can get real food, not just donuts. We can get real food brought in. 5 Mile Swamp Fire, we did that. We scrambled together and we took down Firehouse sub sandwiches, Crystal Burgers. I did get donuts, and then some energy bars and snacks and things from a grocery store, and then water from emergency management. And I carried it down and I went around and we handed that out to the folks on the fire line that since 8 o'clock that morning had been out there and hadn't had anything to eat and precious little to drink. And so we were able to do that. So in those circumstances, yeah, but that's something that I would think we deal with at that time. We got a little time to deal with it. But for an urgent response situation, this is pretty much all we're talking about. All right.
All right. So to emphasize something that you talked about, the towels, those are probably the most important thing that we can get beyond the water.
Right there on this deck.
Yeah, those towels are great. I know when we go to fires and we're coming out and I'm sent to rehab, I'm immediately looking for the person that has those, because those towels are, they'll cool you down like that. It's amazing how quickly. And Skyline, I don't know what they put in the water, but they have the coolest towels I've ever put on my head. We want to locate it well outside of the IDLH area. IDLH is the immediately dangerous to life and health. So it's the hazard area. It's the easiest way to think about that. We want it well outside for a couple reasons. We want guys to be able to take their gear off. That stuff is designed, it encapsulates us so that the heat can't get to us, but unfortunately we can't shed heat as well either. So by getting it far enough away that we can take the coat off drop the pants down around our ankles, we can shed that heat a lot quicker. And the other thing is we want it out, removed from the hecticness of the situation, because guys can't completely relax and recover if they're still in the middle of everything that's going on. You've got to be able to remove yourself long enough to do that in order to continue to effectively participate in the incident. And then it should provide shade or warmth in the winter. The shade is real big. Y'all can see I have very pale skin. I can handle the heat. Okay. You know, I work out. If you drive by this station, you know, when y'all leave here, I'm going to go walking. I'm going to do 3-4 miles in the sun. That's no big deal. The heat is bad, but to me, the UV is the worst. The UV just kills me. So, you know, I'm immediately looking for shade. Got to get out of the sun, and that's when those pop-ups that we talked about, they don't have to be anything special. Like I said, just cheap ones from Walmart work. And we've got one up that we carry on our engine that we'll pull out for small incidents. I think Chief was working with y'all to try to get some bigger ones that we call y'all out for bigger incidents. Remove from vehicle exhaust. Obviously, we don't want to breathe in all those carcinogens and the CO and all that. And the fans that we used to use, same thing. They were motorized, like I said. And we had a hose that we'd run out and try to get the exhaust out, but it just never quite worked as well as it should have. And one of the things that EMS is going to check is they're going to check the CO reading in our blood. And it's not doing us any good to check that if we're blowing CO on the guys in the rehab. So we want to try to get it away from vehicle exhaust. And then accessible to EMS units, we do need to have access because, like I said, they're going to come in, they're going to check our vitals, and we have the parameters spelled out in our standard operating procedures, both for the county and our department. And it provides guidance for EMS. If we don't meet certain criteria, we can't go back to work. And if we meet other criteria, they're going to send us to the hospital for further evaluation to avoid these situations. So the ambulance needs to be able to access their equipment and easily load the patient and take them to the hospital should it be necessary. And then responders should not move directly into air conditioning after strenuous work. It feels great to go straight from the hot outside inside of the firehouse when we've been working, because you're slammed with that cold air. It feels great. But really, it's not the best for us. It's better to bring your core temperature down, your ambient temperature down, before you go into the air conditioning, because when you go straight to the air conditioning, it'll actually cause your body to not cool down properly. So it will not, you don't cool down right, and you're going to be hot. You're not going to get that full rehab effect that you need. So
yeah, so when your body perceives cold, it starts constricting the capillaries and everything in the extremities, and so then your blood flow in your extremities, which is where you're intending to shed heat, isn't going there nearly as much, and so then the core temperature is holding the heat and it's not getting rid of it. So we want to try and avoid that. So some things that are counterintuitive, we want to make sure, we understand the physiology of it so we don't run ourselves into problems. Because there are occasions, we had a fire at the hospital 2 weeks ago. Thankfully, it was somewhat minimal, but it could have been a major incident. One of their main circuits, they said exploded, but it was one of the main switches in the building that fed power to all the hospital, and it burned up. And so it had no main power in there. And fortunately, they used fire extinguishers. We were able to use fire extinguishers. We were able to gain control, and there was a disconnect ahead of it that we could isolate it. So it didn't turn out to be a major fire. It turned out to be a major situation because the hospital was without power except for the emergency circuits, which didn't include air conditioning. And they were without power for about 7 hours. So it quickly became a major incident. Well, the building behind the hospital, the Laughlin building, still had electricity, so the air conditioner was working in there. So we had that set up as kind of a staging area, so I didn't have all my resources sitting out in the day, midday heat, because this happened at 1 o'clock. So I didn't have all my resources out there. I was able to get them in the air conditioning. But as a rehab area, not necessarily appropriate, although it's readily available and it's right there. Cool. But it wouldn't necessarily be a great rehab area had we had extensive firefighting operations going on. Just as an example of the type of incident that we would anticipate y'all would be involved with. Berry Hill School fire. It's right down the road here. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it was, 11 o'clock at night, I think the call came in? Yeah, just shy of 11. We got a call of a structure fire at the old Berry Hill School. Now, this was actually the site of the first courthouse in Santa Rosa County. That burned down in 1869. They subsequently built a school here, and there was a 2-story Milton High School or Santa Rosa Academy was on that site, and it burned down in 1914. And then it was a vacant lot again for quite a while. They built the Canal Street School after that. And then when they started outgrowing the Canal Street School, they built the Berry Hill School in the 30s. And it sat there ever since. And it was a red brick classic school of that era. It had been added onto, so they added that little back part with leaving the courtyard inside there over the years. And the Berry Hill School moved out in, I think, 93 or 94 out to where it's at now. This building was then vacant. The school board moved into it as an administrative center, and it was such until they built the Dillon facility out there where the old Food World was, next to the old Kmart. Then it was vacant again, and it had been purchased, and they were talking about converting it into apartments, but it had been sitting vacant for a few years now. Well, 11 o'clock in the morning, we get the call of a structure fire. I also happen to monitor PD whenever my radio's not in a page mode, and so I'm listening, and the first police officer got on scene before our guys even got out the door here, and he advised fire through the roof. So this is not a good situation. We get down there, and the whole right side, or left side of the building from the front perspective, there was fire blowing through the roof, and it was well involved. So this was one of those fires that is defensive pretty much from the start. We're not going to be able to go inside. We're going to have to fight this from the outside. So it's going to be a long operation with lots of resources. So I called for a second alarm, and we started setting up different areas. So it's we ended up with 3 different divisions, and these are in the incident command system. This is how we structured the fire ground to be able to manage it. So I have division officers in charge of each section. So we had Alpha, Delta, and Charlie operational with resources assigned to each one. And we went to 2 alarms. We had multiple companies. You can see all the trucks out there that were active in service. And a long-term operation. We were fighting fire out there for greater than 8 hours. This, given the size of this incident, would really warrant multiple rehab areas. Now, as it was, we didn't have y'all. Skyline Fire Department, as Jim says, we've got some resources, and they are great. They do the best they can. They came down, they set up then we didn't have sun, it was nighttime. But they set up a rehab area down here. We had EMS came in, we had an air truck down here. We had a lot of resources, and this was all set up. Now, our department, that's our Engine 23, that's me, that's Navy Fire. We were working this area here and over here. It's a long walk through deep water to get to the rehab area. Our guys never really got over there and partook of the resources at the rehab area. So what precious little rehab we had was one little cooler and a couple of chairs or the tailboard of the engine up in this other corner. It would have been ideal to be able to set up a rehab area up here and have that resource available to us. It's night. It wasn't. This was not an operation where we're operating inside, so we don't have to be on air the whole time. So it wasn't an incredibly exhausting operation. And my objective, once we decided we're not saving it, is nobody gets hurt. We're going to just do what we got to do. We want to get this thing put out, but I don't want to hurt anybody trying to do it. So we were being very careful and not working to exhaust folks. But a large operation like this one's not a bad location. You see it's pulled back. It's behind the trucks. You can see the building, but it's back out of the way. EMS was able to drive in and out right here because we had everything around here locked down. Berry Hill was shut down. All these roads were shut down, but EMS could get in and out. Same would work here. You could set up here and they could get in and out. That yellow line right there is a hose, and there was hose running a lot of areas. We had a hydrant here feeding all these. We have a hydrant way down here. And so that's an issue we got to take into consideration. A lot of times on something like this, we've got hose laid out. You can't drive over that. But this was a good location. One here would have been a good location. This is the type of situation that y'all would be invaluable in. What I'm looking at is one of the advantages we have. We've been working very hard with the surrounding departments to establish a working relationship to where we can function on a fire ground almost as if we're a single department. In this county, we have 15 different fire departments. We have a firefighters association which represents those fire departments. They meet here every other month, and I'm the president and Jim is the secretary of the association. So we work together quite well. We actively train and work together as departments. None of us are big enough that we can manage anything like this by ourselves. We have to rely on mutual aid. And so as such, we have the capacity to develop policies and work together. So as Jim was saying, we have a rehab policy, which is an addenda to our firefighting policy one, or it's actually addenda to our incident command policy, which covers rehab procedure. So all of what we're talking about today is covered in this SOP. We've had this for many, many years. Several years ago, the issue became a concern to the association. And so we worked as a group to develop this based largely on this, which is the Santa Rosa County Firefighters Association SOP on that. And it establishes, as Jim says, the criteria when it's mandatory. Heat index, cold, wind chill index, all of that. What establishes the criteria where it's mandatory? You got to do it. And then everything about the procedure. It's basically modeled on that and the same criteria. And establishing where EMS has the role. I'm going to propose to our association, once we're sure we've got the capability in place with y'all, that we incorporate you guys on anytime we've got a second alarm. We'll just pull the trigger. Second alarm would include you guys. Dispatch would bring you out, and then you would be coming in. Y'all understand the incident command system and how all that works. So your senior representative arriving on scene would come to the incident commander and coordinate, and we would direct where those are set up. This kind of just happened organically. Skyline happened to be set up down in this area, and that's where rehab ended up being, and it wasn't anything that I recall that I said, put it there. They were following logical parameters, but this is kind of what has been happening. So y'all will represent a great improvement in our capability to do this. There we go.
So just to kind of clarify what he's talking about when he's talking about a second alarm, the way our fire response works, for a fire, the first alarm would be everybody assigned to that fire. So a fire here in the city probably would be Station 23, which is us, and that's our engine on-duty crew. Our off-duty personnel get recalled if they come in. And then, depending on where the fire is in the city and what it is, an engine from Skyline, a ladder from Pace, and an engine from Avalon. Say that's the first alarm. And then, if we get there and the resources on that alarm aren't enough, we would ask them to strike a second alarm, and then that would bring in more resources, additional engines and ladders, whatever it is that's set up for that alarm. So what he's talking about is if we have a first alarm fire, usually we're going to be out of there in about an hour, hour and a half, couple hours tops. So you guys mobilizing and coming in really isn't necessary. We can handle those. We do those all the time. Somewhere in the county, there's fire every couple days. So, we're pretty well set for our first alarm fires. But when it starts escalating and we have to start striking second alarms, that's when we're really going to need the help because now we're bringing out a lot of people, and we have a lot of different things we have to manage. So having you guys will be very invaluable to be able to take that off our hands and help get that set up and manage that. And I can't tell you how important it is. I've been to several multiple alarm fires that the only reason they were multiple alarm was because of the heat. Guys were going in, and typically we go to rehab after 2 air bottles on our air packs, and then it's mandatory to go to rehab. But with the heat, you just can't work as long. And I've been to several fires where we weren't on the first alarm, but everybody on scene was wiped out. They couldn't stand up, much less put their gear on and go in and work. So having somebody to help get that rehab and get those guys back to work will bring that incident under control much, much quicker and much safer, so that we can do the job correctly. All right, so responders are assigned to rehab after a predetermined time of work. Like I said, 2 bottles is mandatory for us, but the incident commander may say, well, it's really hot, I want you going after 1 bottle, or one task. A lot of times we'll go in, if we've got the manpower, we'll go in, we'll start the task. Once our bottles go off, we come out, he'll say, go ahead and go to rehab. You guys get ready, because after you rehab, we're going to give you this assignment. So he can manage those resources. But, that's not something y'all need to worry about. Just know that the firefighters know that we have an amount of time that we have to go, and then we have to go. So each responder is logged into rehab by name and time of entry into rehab. They're going to come to you as a group. We work in what we call companies, which is your assigned work group. My company today is into 23, be myself, my driver, and my firefighter, and my hydrant guy. And so we work together. In the city, we may be split out doing other jobs, but if we go out into the county, we're going to stay together. We're going to work as a group. And when we come out of our assignment, we're going to go to rehab together. And so this is the thing that he was talking about, how important it is for our record keeping. This is where y'all can really help us. You can log us in, write down the names, the unit number, and the time we go in. And then we'll do our rehab, and EMS will kind of help that. You guys can move through and help, but logging in and logging out is vital. Like he said, guys come back, they think they feel fine, or even they know they don't feel fine, but they don't want to say they don't feel fine, and they have a medical emergency. And like he said, they come in and they do an exam of everything with how the department is run, everything that has to do with that incident. We need to be able to provide documentation to them, to the investigators, saying that firefighter whoever went into rehab at this time, and we're not expecting you to keep the medical records for the rehab. That's for EMS. And then provide the time they were checked out. And by getting checked out, they went through that medical exam and were approved by EMS to return to duty. So each responder should remove protective equipment and clothing. I talked about it's important to take the jacket off. We have the hood that goes around our neck and head. That needs to come off. The lot of heat gets held here in our throat and our neck. So got to take that off. They don't necessarily want to take the pants off, because unless they put their boots in the truck, they don't have shoes. So the best we can do is drop the pants down around the boots, and then sit and relax, let that heat dissipate. And that's another thing y'all can do when you're not checking people in. As you're moving around, handing out waters and rags and stuff like that, encourage the folks to take that stuff off. If somebody's sitting there and they got their pants on and they've still got their coat, maybe they just unzipped it or whatever, tell them, hey, go ahead and take that off, cool off. Because you don't, a lot of times, especially if there's a lot of work that's having to get done, guys are real eager to get out of there. I'm probably one of the worst about it. I'm not good at sitting around. So if there's a fire going on, I'm ready to, I want to drink a bottle of water and I want to go back. So you've got to encourage them, hey, sit down, take it off. You can put it back on if you need to later, but go ahead and cool off now so that you can work longer later. EMS is going to check vitals against the established standards, and they'll record all that, and they'll keep that information so you guys don't have to worry with that. If they ask you to help,
they're covered by HIPAA, and that is confidential medical information. Even though it's gathered there in that fire scene and everything, so they'll deal with that side of things. You can assist them as necessary, but I would not ask you all to, even if you have first aid training or any of that stuff, I would not ask you all to get involved in trying to do assessments or anything, because you then start raising some liability issues and all of that. The way it's set up is that's their role. If we can keep it to where that's all they're doing and y'all are managing the rest of the site, you're doing the log in and log out, and you're setting up everything, you're handing out water and all of that, that frees them up to focus on what they're doing. They should be able to manage that side of it. And it's just, again, there's some liability issues and some privacy issues that probably it needs to stay that way.
And then responders need to drink at least one bottle of water. That's vital. You can, when you come out on a fire, typically you're going to look like you've been in a swimming pool, from just being so sweaty. So you've got to replace that. I think, to me, one bottle of water is certainly a minimum. I would say I try to get 2 if I can. And the other thing we talk about were the electrolyte drinks, Gatorade, Powerade. My daughter plays soccer, and my wife always gets her this liquid IV stuff, which is kind of really sweet Gatorade, but she swears by it. Just stuff like that replace those electrolytes. Electrolytes are important. If your electrolytes are out of balance, it can lead to some serious health consequences, including death. So, getting those replenished is really important, but you've got to make sure these guys are doing it. So as you're handing them out, kind of watch. If you see somebody that's not really drinking their water, encourage them. Obviously you can't tell them, hey, drink that water. But, hey, go ahead and try to finish that water. I got another one here for you. Make sure they know that they need to get that water.
Yeah, he talks about encouraging. Understand, it's a reality. Fire service is a closed society. It's fascinating to a lot of people, and you wouldn't believe that just John Q. Public that's just wanting to be all up in our face and all, and, well, I can help and all that. Firefighters are just by nature not ugly, but it's a closed society, so they're not very receptive to anybody that's not fire service being right up in there and trying to tell us what to do. So just keep that in mind is, when he says encourage, don't come off telling somebody, take that coat off or da-da-da-da-da, because you may encounter a little bit of resistance, especially when they're exhausted and hot and cranky. Did you have?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
The rehab procedure. They say once they finish 1 bottle or 2 bottles, then they go back into rehab. Now, we're going to be there basically to help them rehab, but are they going to go directly to EMS first and get?
Well, no. We're going to set up out there, right? Okay, when we get down in here, we'll go out and actually set up a little rehab area. What they're doing is you've got the chairs set up, you've got the shelter, you've got a place for rehab. They'll come in and they'll crash in the chair. As they get there, you log them in and they take a spot. You offer them water, you offer them one of those wet, cool towels, and they sit down. EMS they know what their role is, and they should be coming along and getting to each firefighter sitting in the chair and taking those vitals right there. Ideally, that should be happening as they go along. EMS will just come up and take the quick vitals. They're just going to check blood pressure, hook a pulse ox up, just take some basic vitals, take temperature somewhere, and then go on down the way, and they'll record that information. They'll stay in that rehab area. They may stay in that chair. They may move around in the rehab area a little bit, but they're not supposed to leave. They stay there. So we go into the next part, leaving rehab. Responders should be spending at least 15 minutes there. Now, this is an area where there's a disparity because our procedure predates the other one. Ours says a minimum of 10 minutes. The county one that we set up, which I wrote both, but the county one says 15 minutes, is should. So it's not a mandate, but it's a should. The idea is give them a time to cool down and all. They need to have their vitals checked when they come in, and then before they're being released, EMS would check them a second time and make sure that they fall within the accepted parameters. And they're going to be looking at core body temperature, pulse rate, blood pressure, all of that stuff. And then they stay there until they're given a new assignment or demobilized. One of the key things, and if you had incident command training and all, freelancing is a big problem on an incident. We don't want anybody wandering around an incident scene doing what they think is the expedient thing to do. That creates big problems. And it happens with firemen. Like Jim says, they're keyed up, they're on the scene. One of the reasons we wanted to get this somewhat removed is so they're not there watching and trying to jump up and go help and go do this, that, and the other, because that's their nature. And we're dealing in this county with a wide array. We've got 16 members of our department. Among those 16 members, there's 270 years of experience. We've got a very mature, established department. Now, in some aspects, that concerns me because I got a bunch of old guys like myself that are running this department because, our average median age in our department's in our 40s, I think. So, but that's good. I've got great experienced guys that know how to do the job. Now, other departments are new, got a bunch of young folks, and then other departments are volunteers, and you have a whole hodgepodge of senior folks, young kids, a lot of experience, hardly any experience, and they can all be showing up on the scene at the same time. So that's a lot to try and manage, and so we've got to be real careful about it. And so that's one area where y'all are going to have to here's the procedure we have to go by. And we're told nobody leaves unless they're either assigned or demobilized. So as Jim was saying, they come in as a group generally, and generally they're going to go out as a group with a function. If they go through rehab, like he said, the incident commander needs to know, okay, I've got a ready reserve at rehab because they've gone through it and now they're sitting there waiting, and then I'm going to pull from there. And oftentimes I may be calling on the radio. We would want you all to have our fire ground frequency. Usually we're on CTAC 1 or CTAC 2. We would want rehab to be a rehab officer running rehab, and I could radio to the rehab officer and say, what have I got in rehab? How many do I have available, or what units are available in rehab? And then I would be able to make those assignments. Once those assignments are made, boom, they come back out. And then when they leave, you would enter that time into the law. So it's a managed process there. And they would come into that, stay there, and then go back out, and they would be given another assignment. And so we desperately try to minimize the amount of wandering around on the scene because that's where problems come in. You get people going out and giving conflicting directions and this, that, and the other. We try, and it's working pretty good. I mean, over the years, we've gotten to where everybody understands this and they come to expect it. So, all that said, any questions here about what we've talked about today?